Joining me now is Greg Palast. He is the Puffin Foundation Fellow in Investigative Reporting. He's also the author of the New York Times bestseller, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, which is also now a feature documentary. Greg, good to have you back, man.
Glad to be with you, Cenk.
All right, great. So there's a lot of topics to discuss as quickly as we can. First, let's talk about the power companies, because it turns out you actually used to investigate power companies.
Yeah, before I was an investigative reporter, I had an actual job, which is I was investigating power company crimes for the US Justice Department and countries all over the world, attorneys general. I even worked with California Public Utility Commission. So I know all about this crime wave parading as a power company called PG&E.
So obviously in California here, we are having major issues. They're shutting off the power for long stretches and because of the fires. So what's your take on that? I don't know. Should they not shut off the power? Is that a legitimate concern? Well, what's your thoughts on
There's a couple things. Okay, the Kincade fire was started because a jumper cable on a PG&E line busted. And so what happened was they said that they were gonna fix that by this past April, 2 years. And they still hadn't fixed it because they were taking their money, they were paying dividends. Now they're in bankruptcy, they're still paying off their bondholders at exorbitant rates instead of fixing the system that they promised to fix. Now understand, you and I pay electric bills in California. If you're in Northern California, you're paying PG&E. They were actually given our money to fix those lines. They didn't do it. So rather than fix the lines, they've been paying off their executives and the speculators instead of maintaining the system. This means that their systems are blowing up, their transformers are blowing up, causing fires. This doesn't happen in the rest of the world. This is like Pakistan. So they're turning off the power in wide swaths, partly because they also didn't spend the money on, you put wind machines and meteorological sensors all over the mountain areas, as the Department of Water and Power does here in Los Angeles, which is a government-owned system. So they spend more money on protection. And so you don't have to cut off 100,000 people at a time. In LA, there are high Santa Ana winds. You'll cut off 1,000 or 2,000 because you have to. But you don't cut off 250,000 people at a clip because you didn't maintain the system with our money that we gave you. That is, by the way, I brought criminal charges with the Justice Department against companies for doing the same thing previously. These guys, it's time to put them out of business and turn them into a government agency.
So I want to talk about that too. Look, in the post game today, I also want to talk about the fires because one of our hosts had to leave his house. And I want to give you just a little bit more details about that, tyt.com/join if you want to hear the post games. But we got the fire in LA, we got the Kincade fire in Northern California that you're talking about. And it's the utilities making these decisions, and they're called public utilities. So I've always been honestly a little confused about, are they public, are they private, what are they?
Okay, in Los Angeles, we have a publicly owned system. So it's not a system that burns up or blows up its customers. In most of California, Northern California, you have a private company which calls itself a public utility, but it's a stockholder company. So they put their stockholders first. The problem with that is that you had 8 people blown up and burnt to death in San Bruno because they didn't properly maintain the gas lines. I investigated that, by the way, for British television of all things. And we found that they did not properly basically test their gas lines as they're required to by law. Okay, that's one. So then you have 100 people burnt to death in 2 major fires caused by their faulty equipment. Okay, you have to understand, power equipment's not supposed to burn you up. And so what happened is, I have found throughout my investigations worldwide, when you have public systems, people survive. When you have private systems, you're gonna find out that people are burnt to death. I hate to put it this way, for profit, because it's not that they want to kill you for a profit. It's just that they're not putting in the money that they've been given to maintain the systems. It's absolutely insane. I just came back from like Switzerland, where they don't have such things. You notice all over California, especially Northern California, you have power lines running through forests. So when they drop, when they break or the transformers snap, the whole place blows up and you have a massive fire. You should be putting these things underground as they do in civilized nations. This is not Pakistan. We're talking Silicon Valley, the richest area on this planet, most inventive area. Look, you don't have sewer lines in the air because they break, it's a mess.
Good
but
point.
it doesn't kill you.
Good point.
You
That's
got
a
a
great
power
point,
line in the air
actually.
and it breaks. We got so used to junky systems like Pakistan that we don't even notice. So it's not a public utility in Northern California, ain't public, and it ought to be. In New York, when we had a same renegade type company, which is endangering people, power going off all the time, it had a giant utility, Lilco, 3 million customers. The state simply said enough is enough and took them over, and it was run by the public at a low cost, more reliable, safer, cheaper. And that's what we need in California. Enough, if it's a public utility, it should be public.
Okay, I'm gonna say the last two things on that, and then I want to turn to voter suppression, which you're talking about. So look, when I moved to this country, I came from Turkey when I was 8 years old. And in Turkey, the power and the water would get shut off all the time. It's like, oh, this 12 hours or this 2 days or whatever, you're not gonna have power. And so when I came to America and the power and the water, I literally asked as a little 8-year-old kid, like, so they never shut off the power? They never shut off the water? Like, this place is like heaven, right? Well, we've lost paradise. Literally.
In Northern California.
In Northern California, there was a city called Paradise that burned down because of this, and we lost what made America great. And it wasn't profit making. That's what Republicans tell you. Oh, what makes America great is everybody just ripping other people off and getting as much profit as they can, and just no, that's not true. So when Buttigieg says, "Oh, look, I just want to give people a choice in healthcare," it's like saying, as one of our viewers pointed out earlier in the show. It's like saying, oh, I want to give you a choice on fire insurance. You could either have your house burnt down because you didn't have enough money for fire insurance, or we have a public fire department. That's not a choice. That's not a choice.
Wait, you want a socialist fire department?
Exactly.
Well, yeah, I know. So look, we have socialist fire departments, and we have socialist water in most of California, which by the way is privatized in other places, and the water goes off. So in Southern California, you have a public water and power system, and we don't have lights and power and water going off all the time. In Northern California, your company is literally killing its customers. Okay, enough, all right, enough. Because you can't have a free market in electricity. I've heard this baloney. I was lecturing at Cambridge in England, and these professors are talking about the free market in electricity in California. Isn't it wonderful? I said, unfortunately, there's one wire that goes in your house. You don't have two switches. Oh, I want this company for this light bulb and that company for that light bulb. It's nonsense. These guys have us by the bulbs. Enough. It's enough. Let's bring democracy and socialism. The answer, you don't want fires in Northern California? We need a socialized electric system like we have in Los Angeles.
Yeah. All right, so voter suppression, obviously a disaster. We've talked about it before.
Yeah.
Cost the election in Georgia, no question about it.
No question.
So we're going into 2020 here. We're going into the primaries.
Oh, look out.
Yeah, so what's the current state of play? I know that obviously Stacey Abrams is working on an effort to register more voters.
Yeah.
And so is Gillum, et cetera. So tell us where we are.
Bless Stacey Abrams, who was the first black woman to ever run for governor. The election was stolen from her in Georgia last year. Her legal team has hired my team to provide all our databases and expert testimony for her federal lawsuit because we found out, we sued Brian Kemp, the guy who was in charge of the election. He's also running for governor as the GOP candidate, so he's fixing his own election. He removed, are you ready? We have the names and addresses of 340,134 voters, most of them black voters, who were removed from the voter rolls of Georgia illegally. We have their names and addresses. And Stacey Abrams lost by just a fraction of that amount. That is, you took away 1/3 of a million legal Georgians off the voter rolls, and you get the GOP candidate making himself governor. Now, the problem is, while it's great that I'm working with Stacey Abrams and her crew in federal court in Georgia, this trick has spread to 20 other states. We're talking Virginia, North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, basically the big swing states. And so I'm very concerned that the same trickery that removed 1/3 of a million people in Georgia illegally is going to now hit other states in mass. And we just had about 400,000 people removed in Ohio. And I can tell you, our analysis is about 70% of those removals were illegal. Mostly young people, urban people, renters from our information. We hope to bring a court case, but even more, I will be reporting on that. By the way, to announce that I'm going to be doing investigative reporting for the Guardian newspapers for 2020. But I'll stay with you, Cenk, because make sure you get those reports too.
All right, that's wonderful. Thank you. Look, if you vote for Republicans, they're going to look to cheat. They're looking to cheat in all these voter rolls cases. And when I say cheat, I mean it. So it's not it. You would have to be an unbelievable sucker to think, oh, what a wonderful coincidence. It turns out they took out young voters, African American voters, and all the different voters that are likely to vote Democratic. Huh, what a lucky break the Republicans caught in all those different states. So they're doing it on purpose, obviously, and they shouldn't be allowed to get away with it. It's an affront to our democracy. But you mentioned Virginia there. Virginia now has a Democratic governor, and so what's going on?
Okay, you've got a legislature which is still by one single voter's vote, Republican, but you also have a election boards which is controlled by the GOP. But more, they're still maintaining, and here's one of the problems we have. Democrats come in, while Republicans come in and they change the whole voting system to fix the system for themselves. Democrats come in and are very slow to reverse the game. They have studies and they look at it and they play around, then the election goes by. Here's the problem. We had in Virginia, I had Chris Kobach. Remember that guy, Chris Kobach of Kansas? If you don't remember, Mr. KKK, Chris Kobach of Kansas, he had this system called interstate crosscheck. He gave a list of people to Virginia that he said were voting in 2 states, okay? And on that basis, Virginia removed 46,000 voters from the voter rolls. That's in Virginia. Not one was an illegal double voter, but 46,000 people, and with names like Rodriguez, Garcia, Black, Johnson, you kind of get it, the bluish voters.
Yeah, so look, I always believe in striking back. So the minute any red state does it, if I was in a blue state and controlled it, I'd say, oh yeah, well, we just happened to find a whole bunch of voters that were in rich suburban areas and in evangelical neighborhoods. Look at that, they got the same name too. I crossed all them off the list. Sad day, okay? You guys wanna play? Let's keep playing. Anyway, we're out of time, but I know you wanted to say one thing about the Dayton shooting and work on that.
That's right. My assistant producer, Jevin Lamar from Dayton, Ohio, his cousin TJ was gunned down in the massacre. We promised a damage report that Jevin was gonna, he's a hip hop artist, that he'd create a hip hop track that you can show on TYT about Dayton, about his cousin, because we're raising money for a group called Daybreak Dayton, which is a homeless shelter where Jevin himself had to go for shelter.
Okay, so everybody check that out. Try to put a link down below if you're watching this later.
Yeah, we'll get that to you. We are about to release it in a week.
All right, great. So please check that out when it comes out. Greg, thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome, Jay.